we had to change something, and it was recognising that had to change, and we had to recognise how quickly you could do that, what we needed to do. Quite a young team, and in relative terms I was reasonably still, I had experience but not huge amounts of experience. So I think that was quite a critical point. Life's so quick at the minute, isn't it? It's like we're flying around, we're all flying around, we're all commuting here, and then actually, and everyone's like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I can't do this forever.
Alhamdulillah, God gave me everything. Alhamdulillah.
You make a choice and say, come hell or high water, I'm going to do this, then you should not be surprised when you are that. And I gave my soul to this game. There's nothing more I can give.
Everest is obvious to climb because it's there, it's a mountain. Personal Everest, you can't see it. No one can see it but you. Never give up on a dream.
Well, look deep within myself and ask myself how much I want it, what am I here for? Don't lose that desire.
I want to unleash the beast.
When I sat here in this crowd, US 93, and saw all these guys, I realised it's there. It's there for the taking if I put the time in.
Be true to the game, because the game will be true to you. If you try to shortcut the game, then the game's going to shortcut you.
Welcome to the game. Today we've got Tom Mcintosh, the Operations Director for Sport Birmingham.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before we kind of get into your story and your whole legacy, let's talk about Sport Birmingham and what's that about and what kind of that.
Yeah, so
how'd that kind of come about? Because you've been there for like 12 plus years now.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. So I think it sort of formulated way back. There was an initiative, Sport England. So they're one of the sort of government funders, responsibility around sport. They wanted to get things into local communities, into local areas. So they developed the concept of sort of community partnerships on a county basis. Obviously, Birmingham's not a county, but that was the promise. So our area is Birmingham. So Sport Birmingham it sort of started, I suppose, in its work around 2004, 2005.
Okay.
And then I suppose started really formally being more recognised in the run up to the Olympics. So in 2012, we started to really think about what Sport Birmingham was, what it represented. And at that time, we were hosted by Birmingham City Council.
Okay.
And then in 2012, we took the decision to exit our hosting arrangements, really for some various reasons that we felt actually we could operate much more independently. And actually there's lots of challenges in local government at that time. So we took that journey to establish it as its own entity. We still work very closely, obviously, with the City Council. They're a really important partner for us. But that was the start of the journey of Sport Birmingham. So sort of back end of 2012, and then that work continued really with it formally launching and starting to build a bigger team around sort of April 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was us.
So
really.
What's the kind of mantra and the aim for Sport Birmingham right now?
Yeah. So
has it changed much from?
Yeah, I mean, on the back of Commonwealth Games, obviously a big part of us is now actually how do we really activate the legacy? How do we make it worthwhile? So a lot of our work is really grounded in, so we've got really some clear ambitions around making sure that we move people who are inactive to some sort of activity, principally around what they'll achieve around the social and the health benefits. So those who are most inactive become active. That's a real massive sort of area we're looking at and focus for us. Workforce, so the importance of recognising, strong volunteers, strong coaches, strong people around are critical. The sector predominantly relies on volunteers, but we've got to give them the skills and support to help them grow. Other bit for us, we've got a fair proportion, because we're a young city. We focus a lot of our work on young people.
Yeah. Now people don't realise that because we're the youngest city in, I think it's Europe.
In Europe,
yeah.
So that naturally takes us to giving young people a good start, to helping them explore themselves, find a relationship early on with sport and physical activity, because it's not just about what they gain from all of that, their character, their leadership, etc. But it's also about how does that then turn into a lifelong hobby, hopefully, where they can receive the health benefits, and they can also make friends for life. So
Yeah,
there's lots more to it, really.
So then, well, when you just said that, then when you're on about business and you're on about, well, in that example about volunteers, you're on about like you have to strengthen them and then you have to put policies and procedures in place.
Yeah.
So that kind of, for you kind of, and also you kind of joined, I swear, I think it was like 4 years before the London 2012, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so then you kind of like, that was your kind of inception in terms of like, your kind of big moment.
Yeah.
Because you were, firstly, you're putting on an interim basis, were you?
Yeah, so in that sort of transition phase, because we were looking at getting the organisation out, I sort of was heading that up. So I was the interim director, sort of, in my late 20s, sort of heading that bit of work up, which was great and something that I'm, really proud of and reflected on a lot. And then we moved into the next phase, really, which was building the business and building the organisation.
But my question was like the three you kind of in the hot seat. But did you know that kind of coming in, or like as in that was
no, probably not. To be honest, I mean, I was always, I think, ambitious, but I think
how was it managing it? Like that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I'd learned a lot over a quick space of time. There was some, there's some, still is, and there's some fantastic people around the city, and you learn, as long as you're sort of, you're willing to get stuck in and you're open, you learn pretty quickly. And there's a lot of expertise, a lot of expertise within the city that, I drew a lot of sort of learning from. So for me, it was actually being surrounded by some great people that I learned really quickly, and then understanding actually, probably starting to establish myself as a leader and thinking about what I needed to do, what my behaviours were, and how I would sort of put my mark on it.
Was that always in the back of your head? Because I meet a lot of people on the podcast, and like the one concurrent theme right now is that it's always learning. Like it doesn't matter what job you're in or like whatever they started at, they're always willing to learn. But then for you, where did that stem from? Because I feel like you have the similar mentality to me in terms of like, initially when you're younger, like you kind of have this kind of ego where like you're thinking like I'm not taking no advice from someone else, or like what they're about. I kind of just do my own thing. So was there kind of like a learning process where you kind of broke down the barriers and were a bit more open?
It's a good point. I think you always draw, don't you, on people? Where you have sort of role models in your life, whether that's a family member, whether that's your parents, your brothers, and but then I think you also tend to surround yourself with your friends and people, and there's a sort of a supportive but a sort of slightly competitive, wanting to sort of not to be someone who's been deemed as succeeding, and I think
like the one going one step further.
And I think you that's that for me. I mean, I'm naturally fairly competitive, and will always see the sort of that effort, the extra effort, willing to do that. So I think for me it's a combination. You've got to be hard working, but you've got to work smartly as well. When you're working in a big area or a big city or in a big project, you've got to work smartly. You've got to learn from the people around you, and you've got to be open. And it's knowing when to move something forward or when to step back and just actually sort of just appraise it a little bit. So I think for me, I was lucky. I had lots of supportive people around me that were helpful, and I learned a lot quite quickly.
But ain't that a kind of disservice to yourself though? Because before you got into that position, you kind of had all that kind of the background, kind of like the one when you see the movie and you kind of see them working in the gym, like the Rocky movies. So you kind of had that storyline in terms of before you, because like let's take you back in terms of being fairly competitive. Obviously, I read on your LinkedIn like you're a professional rugby player. So then to be a rugby player in the first instance, not even competitive, just even playing it, you have to be competitive. Like I'm competitive when it comes to father side. So being a rugby player, like it's even a bigger like well, I call it ego, but you kind of have to have the edge about it, where like you can't let the next man get past you, like in a scrimmage or whatever.
No, I think that. I mean, I think.
Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a couple of elements to it. I think there's the physical. There's a physical, obviously, element to the game. So you're physically challenging against your opponent. So you're trying to outdo your opposite number. But then I think the other aspect of that same with any team sport. I think there is also, there's a trust. There's a sort of being on the same page. Yeah, exactly. And that gets you through a lot. And I think that's, those qualities and characteristics of value in daily life, but also business. And I think I was lucky, with that sort of grounding and that experience. That gave me a lot. And you don't always realise it.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, when did that kind of thinking come from? Like, so like,
I think it takes you.
So how long have you been playing rugby for? Since you were what?
I was a little bit late to rugby, but probably started playing properly at secondary.
School, so about what, 12, 13, 14?
Yeah.
So then, obviously, rugby was clearly, was your passion, or like, how did it come about?
I think I just loved sport. I played anything, I think I was always athletics, swimming, always probably the first out, the last one in, trying to sort of just keep going. I think I'd always put it down to, actually, probably, again, there was some quite inspirational teachers who were obviously passionate about the sport, and that passion came through how they delivered it.
So that's how you kind of got drawn to rugby.
Yeah. And I think then you sort of, if you're playing lots of sport, you then eventually you sort of think, well, actually, I really enjoy that sport, and I'm having some success at it.
Yeah.
Sort of, and I couldn't play football.
Okay.
Left-footed. I was stuck in defence on the left-hand side. I was tall. I could deal with the air. But in terms
ball
of
at the feet and
the ball at the feet, I just it's not going to happen.
It didn't work. And
it doesn't work. Yeah.
But then, because my question kind of come from when you're on about like rugby being competitive and stuff, you keep saying like you're lucky, but I don't feel like it was kind of luck. Because when I look at like your story and from what you just told me in the last like 10 minutes or so, it's kind of more to do with you learning of your own abilities in a sense. Like for me, that kind of come like as an epiphany kind of later on. But for you, I feel like clearly it's kind of same. It's a similar thing in terms of like the grinding you got in rugby when you're on about dealing with boardrooms and dealing with like teamwork and building and also having that kind of competitive edge within yourself, and also at the same time being willing to learn. It's kind of like a yin and yang. We're kind of like so just talk to me about that. Like, when was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, do you know? I think you recognise it much more now. I'm much more self-aware of those things that had an impact on me. Probably, and then not really recognising at the time that actually those opportunities were like, or amazing sort of achievements at that time. So it's like a bit like, I suppose, how do you? It's the process now. I mean, things like this, you really sort of self-reflect and you sort of think, actually, that was good, and I made that thing. I think, and I don't know whether it's just a maturity thing or what, but I put it again to, I think it's sort of, life's so quick at the minute, isn't it? It's like we're flying around, we're all flying around, we're commuting here, and then
everyone's living life,
and everyone's like, I want to do this, want to do that, and it's now a bit like, well, actually, we don't take that much time actually to pause and think, actually, that was, how did I do that? How did I get there? And some of the things you just, you do make a self-conscious decision, and I think a lot of it was about actually I suppose I knew what I was good at, and I think it's recognising you know what you're good at, and then you make those into real, real strengths.
But let's stop on that point, because it's all well and good saying it and then nothing doing it. Like, cause I remember like when I was smaller, like I was like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then when it actually came to it, like I failed so many times. Like, because you're like, I'm gonna wake up at like, everyone does it, I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. Like, this is when you're younger, like, I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. and then I'm gonna be
retired by the time I'm 36.
I'm gonna do all this stuff, innit? But then, like, so just before we kind of go into like further down the line, let's talk about rugby, and especially at 16, 17, 18, when you're kind of getting good at it and it's like progressing. When did you realize like, well, you just told us there, but you've got a skill in it, but then also having that kind of discipline to kind of work harder than anyone else and kind of keep working at it, like 24/7. So,
well, I think I was lucky because I was lucky. I had a very, very supportive environment. Like sort of like, you know, you need to be taxied around, you need to be supported. So I was lucky I had that in me, but and I had obviously parents and to support me on that. But I think the other bit was, I think for me and sport, it was a bit of an escapism. You know, because I played, you know, my weekends were for sport, you know, and I remember even, you know, and we've all been there, you know, and as a parent now, you're sort of like, well, actually, you want your kids to do well, and study's important. But for me, sport was always an escapism. And then when I suddenly realised that actually this is starting to fill my weekends as well, I was like, this is, I'm enjoying this. But saying that, you know, there were times I was, you know, doing exams and stuff, and you have to realise actually you've got to make some sacrifices. So you know, you can't maybe be out as much with your friends as you wanted to be, and you have to give up a bit of time, because you know, like you've got to sort of keep on top of that, because that's important as well. And that was always important to me. I always wanted to be in a situation where, you know, I was playing sport, loving it, and then it transpired to something else, and I could do that. But I always valued that, you know, I knew I couldn't do that forever, and I also knew that I had other interests as well. So I think for me, sport was a great escapism. I think particularly during that, you know, during those pressure points of exams, you know, I found myself, you know, almost probably putting more time into my sport, but then that actually had a positive effect on that. I was really focused on some of my academic work. So I think that for me was quite actually a good bit of escapism, and it actually helped me to sort of cope with some of that a bit better than I maybe would have.
I think for me as well, like in terms of playing football, like it was that kind of, you know, in that competitive environment, you kind of like, it kind of helps you instill these qualities of like being calm under pressure. You know what I mean? Like not letting the nerves get to you. And I feel like that kind of helped me in my exams, because the exams kind of were easy. Well, they were easy in a sense, but the nerves weren't there in terms of like, just kind of in the moment, just writing it down, and like, even though I might not know everything, but I knew that
you have the
like
confidence.
The nerves weren't really there.
And I think, and I go back, I think also, like, you know, I think you make friendships and that level of trust, and you sort of have those mature friendships, I think, before you actually realise, if that makes sense. You sort of, because you're playing, you're training inside out, you have that contact time, you're actually, your friendships sort of like accelerate quite quickly. You have quite, you know, good.
You have a deeper connection.
Exactly.
Because you're always close together.
Always a bit of a common purpose, and you don't always feel that on the other aspects of your life at school and things like that.
So then, when did business kind of come a thing, like business development and kind of management? Like, I don't really know what to call it, because you're kind of in business, and then you kind of into first it was community management, but that kind of like that kind of trajectory. Like, let's talk about that in terms of your schooling.
So I think I was. So I was always interested in probably business, general business, but I sort of I experienced some of the. I did some work with. You know, you get to a point, don't you, young, you think, oh, what direction I want to go. I came out with a degree that was actually industrial design.
Okay.
So like product design. And so you're developing and you're working within the product setting. So
when you say product, like what sort of product, like is it?
So it could be anything from medical equipment to, you know, the equipment we see here. So I suppose that always interested me. And then I sort of fell into it, because then I was obviously doing sport, that, and that always interested me. And then, but then sort of sport sort of was giving me something else again, and I think so I had
you think it's that pressure? Like, what was it, if you can pin it down, what was the other thing that sport kind of was?
I think because you're I think your motivation is so in you, you know, so internally, that you're motivated in a slightly different way. I think that whole thing was sort of kept drawing me back.
Yeah.
Because I was always quite.
Yeah. If you could pin it down, what was it like? The thrill, or what was it like? Because I
just
feel
think
like I've got your answer for you, but I want you to say something, and then I'll see if you corroborate.
I think it's just you've got a sort of a sense of purpose, and I think you sort of, and I think there's another thing here where it's given you so much, so you want to sort of work out a way of how you can
keep getting the drug kind of and
reciprocate it and make something better. So I think that's
because I feel like you're a bit of an enigma in terms of like you're softly spoken, but there's kind of like an edge to you, like competitively. Because you're kind of more drawn to like the high pressure environments. Like you look through your whole trajectory, like in terms of being, first of all, making it as a professional rugby player, it's not a small feat, then going from there and doing that side by side with the business, and then after. Then going into business, and then going into community management, then going to Sport Birmingham, and then becoming a interim director, to then becoming operations director. It's like the whole trajectory just is continuing high pressure environments. So I feel like for you, just high pressure. Like, you're kind of just built for that.
I think. I don't know. I think.
Do you feel the same one?
I don't. I don't have a. I'm not sure. I mean, high pressure environment. I'm not so sure it's a high pressure environment in that sense. I think there's pressures on it, and you want to get stuff done and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's probably what I've learned from higher pressure environments and how I use that. I suppose.
No, but talk about that. So. How does that kind of work out? Like, how do you kind of navigate it?
Well, I think I'm always one for like, I think it's about sort of building a clear picture of if a situation arises or a problem arises, you just got to understand it all. And I think sometimes, probably before there's a temptation where you fly in, you want to sort this out, but actually there's a lot to be said of sometimes stepping back, looking at the whole thing, and really starting to think about actually.
But that's easier said than done.
Like, it is in a situation, and I think that's where I think that comes into some of the stuff. And I think where you're getting at is like resilience, and I think that is a skill that takes time to nurture and develop. But you might build your resilience from other things, and I think that I'm probably a good sort of testament to that, where I build my resilience from other things, but I'm applying it in my day to day.
So when you say other things, what other things were kind of building resilience?
I suppose predominantly sort of what you described in terms of life, but from bringing that resilience and pressure from competitive sport into a workplace steads you well, because you
that's what I'm trying to kind of get
you're gonna have experiences like with business is all about people, and we're always going to have good experience. We're going to have some bad experience, but it's how you navigate and knock those to a side and keep ploughing on. And I think that mentality around that resilience is probably the thing that I probably take away most.
If you could look back at even your rugby career or even business, like, was there like a moment where you met a sort of resistance, or where you kind of built your resilience in terms of like there was a moment where you felt like it was all on top of you and you couldn't really get past it? And then
I think there's a couple of critical, challenging times. We quite a young team, and I was quite young myself, and it's sort of being given that responsibility to.
Just say your age as well, like what age sort of, so everyone gets a picture, like 18, 19 maybe?
Well, I think when I was more thinking, I suppose, 18, 19, I'd just finished school, still playing, or just starting really to play, when I went over to New Zealand in my gap year.
Okay.
And that's where I sort of, that's a different...
official.
Yeah.
But we'll go one at a time.
Yeah.
So what age were you thinking, like when you were about to tell us the story?
I was more thinking later in, like, particularly around that 2012, 2011, when I had probably quite a critical point, because on one hand we knew the business needs, we had to change something, and it was recognising that had to change, and we had to recognise how quickly you could do that, what we needed to do. Quite a young team, and you know, in relative terms, I was reasonably still, you know, I had experience, but not huge amount of experience.
Yeah.
So I think that was quite a critical point where I always remember having the conversation with the team. It was almost like, you know, we can do this, or we can walk away.
Yeah.
And I think everyone was like, yeah, no, we're going to do this. And that was quite a critical point, because if I'd chosen to walk away at that point, you know, it would take me down a very different path.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's always there's always some quite critical things of those moments where you reflect on to say, actually, I'm happy about the decision I took there.
Yeah.
But you know that it was quite
like a daunting challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
But without going into detail about the actual decision itself, but talk to me about the team aspect. So when you say you're a young manager of a young team, that can go one or two ways. That can either be really successful or it go horribly wrong. How did you make it really successful instead of being another statistic?
I think I mean, some of the people that were in that team now, obviously there's a few people move on, but they're doing some, you know, there's just some really good roles. And I think at that time, you know, we had people that they were ambitious. They were, you know, a lot of them, it was their first or second job. A lot of them was their first, but
so
you know,
working had that drive.
Yeah, but then also, I think, you know, Birmingham was a really vibrant place to work, and I think there is that, you know, there is that city feel. There is that sort of gravitas that you're doing something in a place that's quite complex and it's quite, you know, quite big. So I think you know that you had people who were definitely ambitious. Were keen to sort of make their mark. They weren't sort of, you know, they weren't afraid to really get stuck in. And also, I think we had a bit of a sort of a thing of like, you know, if we didn't get it right, or we failed, we would fail fast, and then we would put it right. And that was a sort of a bit of a mantra, I think, that's helped us sort of be brave, but not be brazen or reckless, but be brave. And some of those things,
calculated brave.
Yeah. And some of those things really.
Did that come from you or from?
I think it was a bit of a thing that we all sort of just came up with and adhered to, and it's just something that we felt, actually, this is a time to be brave and get on with it, because we've got opportunities, and I think. And I just think you had people that were really quite committed.
Was that across the board, or were there a couple of rotten eggs, or? Because I'm just trying to get a picture.
I mean, you're always going to get people that aren't quite on the same page, and you either have to make a choice whether you're going to sort of invest your time in working and developing them,
and get them turned around,
or it's a conversation, isn't it, to be had with them, and usually those conversations are, you know, a lot of the time, actually they're making their own decisions in the way they're behaving and presenting themselves a lot of the time anyway. So you can sort of set, because you pick up on it, don't you? And then it's just having the conversation the right way.
Was that difficult for you at any moment, like, especially when you were first starting out, or were you kind of just like?
I think. I think the first few conversations were probably a bit uncomfortable. But then you sort of learn quite quickly that actually, if you confront the earlier you confront these things, actually the easier it is, and the better it is, and you build up, and then you have. You build up that sort of team and that trust and that consistency.
So how do you also, like, kind of adds on to the last question, but building that kind of friendship in terms of, well, not friendship, but having that friendship and then that working relationship. In terms of, like, you want to put arm around them at certain points, and then sometimes you want to be a bit brazen and like tell them what it is. So it's like, how do you kind of manage that, especially when you're only a few years older, or maybe they're older than you? So it's kind of like, you're still.
It's it's a good question. I mean, I always think, like, I think humour's quite a good way of sort of cutting through some of that. But then I think, you know, when it comes down to it, you got to be fair. And that comes with, you know, it comes to that point where you learn you've got to have those conversations early, and you know, because there's a mutual respect there, and if you don't do that, you can lose face and lose respect pretty quickly. So it's just being open, honest, being authentic, all those sorts of things really.
Yeah, because I had a similar situation, like, because we had a pizza shop, Pizza 1 and 2. I'll say this as like opener to like every podcast, but like for me, that was kind of like, I was 18, about 18, 19 at the time, and that was my first kind of like management experience. Before that, I never had a job. Like, I've never worked anyway, so it was kind of like, for me, I was just kind of thrown in the deep end and it was either sink or swim. So then when it came to navigating, I got it wrong a few times. Like a few times I was either too brazen or too lenient, and then you don't know what to say because you've built that friend. Like you're talking about football at one stage or whatever, and then next thing you know, they've done something wrong. So it's like, how do I say to him? Like how do, like, it was kind of like, how do I say to him? So then in the end, I kind of just find like you have to give him a reason. Like you have to explain the reason fully, and then you kind of like be firm in, as in like if they don't do it, then especially after you gave them the reason and the example and you've told them the whole story.
I think
then you got to be like a bit like firm and then just kind of just say it as it is.
Yeah, and just keep reinforcing it, isn't it? And I think it's funny, isn't it? Because there is I've always, there's some of the managers I had, and it was always like, I'm always grateful because they gave me some pretty honest feedback, but they probably knew I could take it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think if the problem is when you have someone that you're not, that maybe isn't quite happy, or you're not, they're not sure where they stand with you and things like that. But then it's about those things really, being open and.
But I think you hit the nail on the head when you go like you gotta attack the problem early. Yeah, because I felt like I only had that position because after the coronavirus pandemic we kind of closed it down.
Right.
But I had that position for about a year and a half.
Okay. And so fair amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to do my A levels. Like A levels, then I went into uni. So I had to do my uni degree. But for me, it was kind of like it was good learning. I felt like I knew how to work hard.
It's like, people, isn't it? You sort of want to. You're going to treat people how they treat.
Yeah, exactly.
How you want to be treated. Treat others how you want to be treated, and that's the mantra, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You want that just sort of. That sort of
respect.
Mutual respect.
Yeah. Like we can all have a joke and stuff, but then when it comes to doing the nitty gritty, like you gotta match the energy. Because as well, like people forget, like they don't really want to do the job. You know what I mean? Like, they're there just to get paid. Especially at pizza shops, like they're just there just to get the pocket money, or even if they're a lot older, they're just there because that's just what they want to. Like that's their mean to an end. They just want to get home. They don't really want to be there.
But then they
don't have that passion for it.
So
you gotta deal with that. You know what I mean?
No, I accept that, and I think we've all done jobs that we're like, I didn't quite, that's not what I want to do, but it's what you take away from it.
Yeah, exactly. But you gotta help them, kind of like reignite them. Even you shouldn't have to, like, but it's just like the unwritten rule, like you have to, but you shouldn't have to, but you have to. You know what I mean? So then, like, once I realized that, and I kind of dropped the ego a bit, then I clocked that, like, you just gotta make it a bit more fun, like even when they're doing the boxes or whatever, like have a quick conversation, and then you gotta
come
keep,
on, are you serious?
Exactly.
Like,
you gotta keep uplifting everyone for no reason, like even though you don't really want it, like you might be tired yourself, but you just gotta keep doing it because then they perform better. Like they'll perform better because you keep talking to them and they keep having that conversation and that kind of open communication.
And that sort of motivate. That I think that's interesting because also then you've got then once people are motivated, they're bought into the whole thing, and then the teamwork.
Yeah, exactly.
The teamwork gets then they
plus they respect you more as well because they feel like he's actually trying to like support me and like help me. So then like how come I'm not doing it for him? You know what I mean? You kind of guilt trip on me doing the job.
And it's and that can be exhausting. That can be exhausting.
Yeah, it's mentally taxing. Like if you weren't my as in like not mine but my dad's, and it was kind of like not the family thing. If it was just like a job that I was put into, being a manager of a pizza shop, I never do it. Because it's like it's too much. Like even if for the pay or whatever, but the mental taxing in terms of like it's a full-time job. Because you're basically the CEO, but you're not the CEO, you know what I mean? So then it's kind of like, what are you really doing it for?
And it's demanding. People want their pizzas on time, don't
they?
Exactly.
100%.
It's not forgiving.
No. It's like constant movement. I remember, man. Like, looking back, it was hell, man. Like for me, I feel like I'm more situated to like kind of boardrooms or like, like nothing with the hot oven, basically. You know what I mean?
Hot oven, nice in the winter, but
but even then, like, because the donut machine's at 250 degrees, I remember my brothers, he was like age 17, 18, and his hand was going black.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Like he was just getting marks, like some skin condition and stuff. Like, yeah, it was mad. Like, because that's what I feel like the pizza shop it kind of makes a break here in terms of like when you're on about your moment of sink or swim, and like when you're on about London 2012, that was kind of mine. It was a lot younger, but that was kind of mine where.
But you realise, like,
yeah, now you learn a lot, but that's only if you take the lessons from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And but then, like, you know, that sort of, I suppose, work ethic, that willingness to try something, is that, you know, that's really important. That's really important, and it might not be what you want to do, but it's what you take from it.
Yeah,
isn't it,
exactly.
as well?
Yeah. You gotta have that.
You've taken a lot from that. I think you actually.
Yeah.
I never want to make a pizza again.
Yeah.
I'll eat it, but I don't want to have to make it sorted out.
And plus, like, you realise that, like, if you don't want to do that, like the mundane jobs, and like you really want to pursue something, because for me, in my head, that was kind of like, it was a bigger goal of like, you have one pizza shop, you work hard, and then you establish someone and bring someone into that role, and then you kind of mold them into it, and then you go from there to 2 pizza shops, to 3 to 4. That was kind of like my kind of overall aim.
Growth sort of,
yeah. But then when that never happened, it was kind of like I had to G myself back up. It's like I couldn't work hard anymore. Like I was spent. I remember when coronavirus first started, I was spent. Like, you know, because I spent so much energy, and then when it's taken away from me, when it's not no one's fault, and you just kind of.
It was a tough time, wasn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah. It's like, how do you pick yourself back up?
Yeah. And I think that's where, you know, and that's saying that you've got something to, you know, to focus on. And I think, you know, there's a lot of young people, I think, that, you know, hopefully they're finding, you know, out the other side of that. But the pandemic was not, you know, it was a real challenging time.
You got to think of it as a positive. Like, if you can go through the pandemic and you can go through all the kind of emotions, and like, because for me, I kind of think of it like no one else has done it. Like, you know, if I'm going through issues, or like if I'm chasing something that's greater than what anyone else has done, then it's like, it's part of the journey, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta like.
Well, you gotta take. You're taking something away from it, aren't you? You're sort of like, actually,
like you have to. I feel like otherwise you ain't gonna perform, like, or like do what you actually want to do. You know what I mean? Did you have like a similar feeling like through your injury, like when you went down from rugby and then you kind of like developed the business? And
like,
I mean, what's the story kind of there?
Yeah, I mean, I had plenty of injuries. I think right leg, knees, which have just managed. So I had my right knee reconstructed. Ligaments damage. I think thing is, you know, the sport and sport, you know, particularly rugby, it's something, it goes with it, doesn't it? It goes with the territory. But they do play in your mind. Injuries do play in your mind, because you suddenly think, I had this really clear purpose. I'm this person, I'm playing this, I'm doing this, and then suddenly my legs out of action. But I think that was probably, you know, you alluded to earlier, but that was probably quite a good turning point as well, because I recognised, almost sort of saying, well, look, my sort of, I can't do this forever, you know, because keep getting injuries and you're off, and you. But I think you know, I took that time. I learnt new skills. I learnt new things. I got involved in the sort of so I was at Mosey Rugby Club. So I'm in South Birmingham, like Birmingham Mosey now. So I got into the community department, and that's where I suppose I learnt a lot more about the workings of that, and how someone like a rugby club could have a really positive impact. So not just developing the sport, but also providing sort of better opportunities and access to lots of young people. So we did all sorts of things, from holiday schemes, sports camps, you know, some very targeted provision within schools to try and actually, you know, what we were talking about earlier around trying to expose the sport of rugby into areas where we know kids have never seen it, never played it, never experienced it.
Like, especially where I'm from, like, we don't really play rugby.
So
I used to go to a grammar school. Like.
So it was almost like, how do we? So I did that, and actually that was a really positive thing in a negative situation when you're injured, but then you can apply yourself to doing other things.
But before we go into like the community management and through then to business development and like what we're on, let's talk about the mentality, like in terms of like, because obviously your mentality was down. Kind of similar to mine, like the coronavirus pandemic, in terms of like you had like a clear
morale,
and you now you're just kind of like you're restricted. Like, I was physically restricted in terms of I couldn't move out of the house, and you were restricted in terms of like you got injuries, you can't really like move the same. Like, number one, like walking the same, and number two, mentality wise, like you can't really do what you actually want to do. So how was all of that?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. The thing is, you sort of you're lucky at that stage because you get injured, but you quickly know what you need to do, and usually, knees were like that was an operations, but you know, like I broke my leg, I've got to spend 3 months in plaster, but then I know I can spend a huge amount of energy of getting stronger, in other areas of my body, or you can. And then you focus once you're in a position, you then focus a lot of energy on your rehab.
Was that instant though? Like, was that like
no?
First thing I'm just gonna start lifting weights.
You felt sorry for yourself for a little bit, but then.
How long was that?
Well, I'm trying to think. Broken leg was a minimum of like 3 months in a cast, but you're probably you're getting up to sort of match fit again, you're probably talking 6 months. So that's best part of half a season, if not a little bit more.
Especially at that age as well.
Knees were a slightly different story. So I first injured my knee, and it was my year of my graduation. So I injured it, and then was literally, I'm trying to think when I injured it, but probably like November time, and I was still on crutches when I did my graduation. So. And that's a bigger injury. So I think the bigger the injury, the more sort of impact that has on you physically. But then you've then got the mental preparation to sort of know that you need to do the rehab to get yourself stronger, so you don't injure again. So I think, it does play on your mind. But I said before, like it sort of goes a bit with the territory. And I suppose I always found that, I was injured, I'd throw my energy into something else. And it's quite easy to do that. But, there is definitely a window where you're injured after the game and you're sort of feeling a bit sorry for yourself. And then...
How do you stop, like, overthinking it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, it was hard. Like, it took me, like, a good 6 months to kind of stop overthinking and just... Just go for something
I think...
else. Because like you'll go to bed and like you won't think about it the whole day, and then you go to bed and you'll be like, I was like this before, like I had this, like I was doing this. Then you can't go to sleep, like you know what I mean?
I think I think it's a good question. I mean, I suppose you sort of try and compartmentalize it, I think, because all you really, I mean, when you're in that situation, all you want to do is you want to get back.
Exactly.
And that's your motivation, really, because actually, I want to get back because I love doing that, and I'm competitive, I want to get involved. And then you start looking down the fixture list and you think, I'm going to get back for that game. And then you suddenly realise, well, actually, that is that ambitious. And then obviously, then you've got your sort of your physios, your medical team that you're going to work with. But then but that's got to... You've got to listen to them, but also you start to listen to your body a bit more.
And plus as well, you got to go to the harsh bit in terms of like, because I had an injury at one point, and then like just give a bit of a story. Like I went to hydrotherapy.
Right. Okay.
So and it was with NHS because obviously I wasn't part of like a professional club or nothing. But I went there, and then they only give you half an hour basically. But it's 3 people, so you're supposed to get 10 minutes each. So
it's quite tense.
It's tense, isn't it? But then for me, because I really wanted to get back to like match fit, so I was just go pushing through the pain barrier. I was just like, that was like my hustle. Like it was just like I'll get there and I'll just keep going because I wanted to max out that 10 minutes and make it feel like 30. And get the improvements for it. So I started developing quite quick. But then I think it was like my 3rd session, every couple of weeks or something like that. My 3rd session, and then I went in, and then there was another guy there, some like a geezer that was obviously very fit before, and then like when you see like fit people get really fat, you can see like the ones had that kind of shape, and then really, so he was like, he got really big. So then now he had like a knee injury or something like that, and then the hydrotherapist was telling him, put your foot on the ground in the water. Like that's the only way you're actually going to get any mobility and try and get you better. And he wasn't doing that. So the hydrotherapist wasted like 15 minutes on him when he could have. That's my 5 minutes gone. So I've only got 5 minutes left. I was watching him, like I'll do much like watching him, like he don't even want to get better. You know what I mean? Like he has like something obviously happened where he's given up. Like he doesn't want to improve.
But your point's right. It's like it's still a bit around. You got to. You got to do all the physio and the hydrotherapy stuff, but it's also what else you're going to do to get back. Get yourself back to where you want to be.
It's like what you do at home.
You've got to do all the extra stuff.
Push it. You're gonna feel pain. Like I remember, like it felt like I was getting knifed. It was that bad, and then like I just had to keep pushing through and like kind of just go through it basically.
And I think that's and you know from your own from your own body sense, you want to get strong and fit to that point, and you know it's gonna take time, but you also know you've got to push yourself. You've got to push yourself. Because that's how you got there in the first place, really.
But it's about like, I feel like very few people make that jump, like, because that kind of like it brought it home for me, because like I was pissed off at him, but like, obviously I wasn't gonna say nothing to him, because I feel I'd take his mental health even lower, because I was sitting there just like watching him do my exercises, and I was like, this guy's wasting my time. You know what I mean? Like, because I could have been using that and more effectively, like, because at one point I had to shout at him. Like saying like, oh, put your leg on the ground, because he'd been there for 3 sessions already, so he's wasted other people's time. And now he's like, what's the point coming if you ain't gonna put your leg on the ground?
Ain't gonna want to,
like he doesn't want to go through no pain.
That's a hard situation, isn't it? Because all you want to do is just get yourself back up.
So like that's what pinned it home for me, where like I realised that it's not made for everyone. Like, you know, when you're on about like, I was lucky to be here, like you said it like I think 3 times when we were talking about it. Like different situations, but I feel like luck has a part to play, but I feel like you gotta roll the dice.
Like, you've got to have the mentality to be there, haven't you? You've got to get yourself into a situation where, I mean, they sort of say
you can execute,
you build your own luck, but like, that's not, you know, I'm not sure that's always true, but
you got to put yourself in that position, and then like maybe luck requires it, but then if you're not in that position, like let's say like if I was, or somebody else was thrown in the same position as you or I, in terms of like injuries or like these certain situations where like it's either sink or swim, they probably just flappy, but like what you realise is that if you actually swim, then there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you'll go even further than you initially thought you would. You know what I mean?
And that's I mean that's not obviously. I mean, look at all the setbacks that some of the top athletes have.
But there you go.
And then like that's probably the part of it. I mean, that's some of the biggest stuff is staying injury free. Is like, you know, there's plenty of athletes that we've seen who have got early injuries or injuries that at the wrong time that have really impacted their
like
career.
No one realises that Alan Shearer got 260 goals, like, because I'm a football man. Because he kind of gave me inspiration when I was looking at his story. Like I can't remember what age he was, but like as he got older, he started scoring more goals, because he was a really prolific goal scorer when he was younger. As he got older, he started scoring more and more, but then he got hit with 2 years. He done his ACL. Especially now, like obviously it's a lot easier to get back from it, but back then it was kind of like a critical injury. And for him, it took 2 years out of the game, and he was working, and when he got back, he scored more goals than he actually did before.
Because he was just stronger, rested his body.
Exactly. But I feel like for him at that moment, it was like it was sink or swim. Like, is he ever gonna make it to what everyone thought he would, or is he not? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like
was he quite young then when he did his ACL?
I think it was kind of middle-aged, but he never developed as a striker till he got older. So you know, when he started banging the goals,
he knew where to go, where to run.
Exactly. But it was that kind of like 2 years is a long time, especially when you're at the top of like nearly at your peak beforehand. So I feel like in terms of like if you want to be successful in your own life and you got these, like it could be obviously clearly it's a small level, but it's the same kind of mindset. I feel like you gotta apply to it. You gotta be, gotta be strong mentally, and like you gotta push past the pain barrier.
Absolutely.
And be uncomfortable.
And you gotta, and I think, and it's almost like, you know, I think now that you can do so much yourself to improve your body, and I think that awareness wasn't always is even better than it was. You know, there's so many different ways of different treatments, different things you can do, and so much advice that you can really, you know, you can really sort of.
I mean, the same principle applies to your mentality. It's like there's a plethora of knowledge out there. Like there's a lot of crap as well, but there's a lot of knowledge in it. And then, like as you said before, it's about I can't remember what you said at the start, but it was something along the lines of like you gotta like figure out what's what. Like I can't remember what you were talking about, but
I think we were talking about sort of difficult scenarios like in business or whatever, and it's almost like you gotta sort of.
When you
understand the facts and figure out what exactly you're trying to achieve, and then once you know that, you sort of can make some really well-informed decisions.
When you were talking about Sport Birmingham in terms of like 2015, 2014, I think after London 2012, and you were trying to make that shift, and you didn't know if it was the right decision, but then you recognised it and then you went for it, and now you're even better for it. But it's kind of it's that it's like you got to figure out what's what for yourself. Like, you know, in your own head, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta like talk to yourself, and you gotta back it as well.
I suppose it's confidence, isn't it? A bit of self-confidence and self-belief to almost go, actually, you know, I've got this, or I'm gonna, make what I believe is the right decision.
And you gotta stick by it.
Yeah.
No matter what, like if you've thought about it and you've like calculated to the nitty gritty, then when it comes to it, then you have to back it. Like you can't just go half-hearted. You know what I mean? You gotta go all in.
Yeah. No, I
So
agree
then,
with that.
talk to me about because after it was kind of like there was a lot of like things going on. From when I looked at the LinkedIn, like, because I can't really remember, but it was business development after the community management. Oh wait, actually, let's go back because I never talked about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about from rugby. So then they had injuries.
Yeah.
Then going into community management at Moseley rugby.
Yeah.
I was about to say cricket, but rugby.
Rugby, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that happened from the injuries, and also I suppose the ambition at that time was, Moseley was developing as quite a lot of heritage.
Okay.
Very old club. Was well, so it, situated in South Birmingham. And I suppose the big bit we realised was actually to build up the brand, to build up the awareness of the club, that they could use that to start to support the wider development of young people, not just in that sport, but all sorts of physical activity and the wider benefits that would bring. So we at one point we probably had between sort of 15 and 25 staff providing anything from sort of 15 to 25 hours a week of coaching all around schools in different areas. So for me, I suppose I learned how that business was running. And that was quite a good that was a good experience because I was doing some delivery myself. And I always think that actually understanding how you on the ground, working with young people, working with adults, that gives you a good insight and a good understanding of the situation. And then now if I apply that back into my role now, you sort of understand actually, whilst it's a different sport, different activity, but the energy that deliverers have to put in to motivate a group of young people to play that activity or sport. So. For me that was a bit of a starting point. So I did that, and then actually I didn't find I actually wasn't sure what I wanted to do, to be totally honest. I knew I liked that and enjoyed it, but then I took a role actually in an IT company, recruitment for about, I think I did about 18 months there. And it was all sort of project management stuff and account management and things like that. And then I realised actually I wanted to apply those skills and get back into sport, community development. So I realised I developed some of my, I suppose, how to handle budgets, project management, all those sort of technical skills that are probably quite important in the majority of roles. But that gave me that work, and it was really through that that I was able to step into that initial role, and then had various roles through what was the early stages of Sport Birmingham to then obviously where I am now.
So just going back to your community, what was the community organisation manager, something like that?
Yeah, so community manager.
Community manager.
Sort of heading up and working in the sort of the community department at Moseley. So
what did that role kind of entail?
So a lot of the work actually focused on some of the school. So we had some of the professional team and wider team were basically as part of the contract and to help really with some financing and the role we wanted them to do was they were deployed in some of the schools surrounding the schools communities. So that was really trying to develop the activity and put quite highly qualified coaches into schools and into community settings to help promote activity and promote sport. And I think what was great is you had predominantly males, from the ages of sort of 17 up to sort of mid-20s who were really good role models in some of these young people. So that was the sort of day-to-day. So we had lots of schools on board, and then we used to do a lot of work around working with multiple partners like the police and others, and we used to run holiday camps in Beelsley.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was again like helping.
Beelsley?
Yeah, Beelsley.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
Beelsley, so helping young kids and
I
young
played
people.
football in coronavirus.
I did. Okay.
Illegally, but like that's all. Like, could you know the astroturf behind you?
Yeah, the 3G there.
Yeah.
Oh, you sneaking one of those sneaking onto there.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to do what
Hopefully
you've got to
the
do.
people watching. Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a throwback.
So we did some of that, and that was good because you sort of that's how I suppose I really start to understand Birmingham and understand actually how maybe an activity like that could appeal to people or how they do it. So I suppose I learned a lot about Birmingham, a lot about the people, the geography, the sort of diversity, some of the different sort of.
So are you not based in
elements of
Birmingham?
How do you mean? Sorry.
So are you?
Did I live?
No, were you born in Birmingham?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
No.
Also you were?
No, I wasn't. No. So I came to Birmingham for university,
Okay.
and then
You went to Ashton?
So I went to Birmingham City.
Birmingham City,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
But I sort of fell in love with Birmingham.
So where are you originally from?
From South London.
South London, okay. Yeah.
So made that travel up to here.
Yeah.
Which was it was different.
But that's a big journey though. Like, what made you do it in terms of like leave your family, your friends, and because I assume like because your accent ain't really a London accent anymore.
No,
I don't think like it's like a mix between like
yeah. I just think I want to do something different. I want to do something new. I grew up in a city, but I wanted to experience another city.
Yeah.
And I suppose circumstances just happened that I just sort of, loved the city, and you sort of fall into it, and then you sort of, you make a job, you set yourself up, and
you just became a Brummie, innit?
Yeah, adopted Brummie,
exactly.
hopefully,
yeah. So then, what was the shift into the IT? In terms of industrial, what was the role like, actually like? Because you talked about it in terms of going from community management to then that role at that was a consultancy firm, like was it?
Yeah, like an IT sort of recruitment consultancy firm,
and then back to Sport Birmingham.
Yeah, I suppose
because that's a bit left field in terms of like you're going one way and then you kind of just.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had that sort of situation where I need to do something different here. It didn't. I felt like I had sort of I'd had multiple injuries, so I was sort of, and I suppose I was still recognising that I was probably motivated to be there because I was playing, and I suppose when that changed, you sort of think, well, actually, where do I want to go next?
Yeah.
And I wanted to just get a sense of actually what does the commercial business offer and look like.
How old were you at this stage? Like what, 20?
Early 20s.
Early 20s,
Early
okay.
20s, yeah.
All right.
So I did that, and do you know what I like? I like the whole thing of the discipline of commuting into Birmingham, doing a demanding role. It was a fairly new business, and it was launching. Then we had sort of the recession not soon after that.
Yeah.
So. But then I sort of did that for a period of time, and then I sort of I got drawn back into sport, and that sort of, just that element of that interest drew me back to that, and so a role popped up. It was like a project management role, quite a junior level entry role. So I thought, well, actually, that sounds interesting. So I did that, and that's when I first worked essentially in the sort of sport development section, working very closely with the City Council as part of what is now Sport Birmingham. So that was my role there, and then I spent a period of time doing that role. Then another opportunity opened up, and then so that was sort of 2008, 2009, and then from 2000, and then in 2012 became the interim director, and then we formally relaunched Sport Birmingham at sort of early 2014 as an independent charity, where it's now.
Yeah.
So.
But why stay now in Sport Birmingham?
Why stay?
As in like.
Yeah, what's my motivation to be? Well, I mean,
because the rest of them you kind of like 2-3 years and then you move forward.
Yeah.
And then move forward. Like.
Well, I sort of felt. I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's a good question, but I sort of felt like because we relaunched ourselves, and I suppose my role had changed. I sort of felt like I was doing a new job anyway.
Yeah.
And it sort of felt, because we'd changed so much, it sort of felt like it was a new organisation.
Yeah, there's a new drive in it.
Yeah, and I think...
But now it's kind of like, it's not your baby, but it kind of is in terms of like, because you were there in its inception, the new version. So you kind of feel like attachment to it.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for you, but I feel like that's
definitely. And I think, and it's funny because then you go, okay, then it's Olympics, okay, and then there's all the legacy of the Olympics, and then, okay, so what's next? Like
Commonwealth Games.
When we got Commonwealth Games, and then, which was amazing for the city, and they did an amazing job with it, under difficult circumstances on the back of the pandemic, etc. But then you think now, well, actually, there's the legacy of that now. So actually, that's quite interesting because there's quite a lot of good things that can be done.
Talk to me about that.
So
what is like your
what's my take on it?
And what do you hope it to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think for me, I think it's not for me about just getting people more active. I don't think we don't want a legacy of just people being more active. I think it's more, for me, it's about recognising that moment on time, but also recognising that actually, all the people out there who are doing the football clubs, the grassroots organisations, the community clubs, they're the ones that have been there for a long time and are doing the work that, whether it's young people or adults, are engaging with. So I think for me, it's how do we make them stronger? How do we make them stronger? And they need resource, they need funding, they need finance, but also how do we make sure that they've got a good strategy, their marketing, all of those skills that take to run a small business. That's for me, the legacy is actually how do you transfer those skills into those organisations, and how do you bring young people
and I suppose how do you not like kind of waste your time?
You
know what I mean? Because it's like there's no point trying to beat a dead horse. Because I feel like I've learned that as well. Like, in the pizza shop, like in terms of workers, where some have come in and then you realise that they ain't got what it takes. So it's like it's like how long do you spend kind of trying to develop them and hoping they change, instead of like believing what you see in front of you. You know what I mean? Like, you have this perception and then you have like, what's the reality?
But you'll be But then if we were talking about earlier that it's taken us a while to build our own self-awareness. So maybe actually, young volunteers, young people, they might not attribute it to that experience at that club or that community organisation, but actually down the line they might realise that had a positive impact on them. So I still think
I'm talking from the adults, like I'm talking from the, as you said, like engaging through other people and developing them. I'm talking from that aspect.
Okay, so the people managing and running the organisations.
To help the young people. Because
Yeah,
I'm thinking like in terms of like, because with young people, like there's always a reason of like they're growing up and like obviously things can change. Like I'm not knocking that, but when I'm talking about adults really, in terms of managing them, because it's like when we realise self-awareness and like hopefully I'll do that and I still continue to do that as I grow older, because obviously I'm still a baby in terms of like my inception to everything. Like I'm only 21, but when it's because I realise a bit now, but then I also realise the game in terms of like I realise why certain people haven't made it this far, or they've had a thing and then they've dropped out, or they dropped out from the beginning in terms of they never got started. So it's kind of like realising that, because obviously we might see the self-awareness, but other people don't. Like, they don't really realise, and they ignore it. Like the fact that they're doing shortcomings here, there, or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's like that's what I'm trying to say. Is like, how do you realise when to invest in someone and develop them? Not in this sense, like just across the board, and also like when do you know that you're actually just being a dead horse and it ain't gonna happen?
I don't know. It's a big question. Yeah, it's a tough question. I think the thing is, I don't know. I think
just in broader terms, like it doesn't have to be with that topic.
No. But I think like your point is like. I've seen that. I mean, there's so many committed adults and people who are running these organisations. And the biggest thing is actually around sort of how they're sort of generating and inspiring young people. And I think it's for me actually that the ones that seem to not necessarily do better than everyone else, but the ones that are really sort of onto something is the ones that then have a situation where the young person who was the beneficiary, who was receiving that support, doing that activity with them, then becomes a volunteer, and then suddenly is part of that family who's helping support the whole thing. And I think that's, for me, it's almost like those leaders and those is how do they nurture the next young person to do what they're doing.
Exactly.
That's the thing, isn't it? And you can't, and that's not always easy to recognise. You might develop some great people, but and then they're off to university and they're sort of long gone, but actually they've done a brilliant job developing that person. So so it's not a simple one, but I think it's almost how do we.
Like for my dad, it was kind of like harder to realise. Like, because obviously I've seen it through second hand, because I'm the oldest son and I'm always with him, and basically 24/7. But like when we go to different weddings and stuff, it's like, oh, we only got invited to this wedding because I helped him out when he was like 14, 15, and he can't remember that. So it's like, because my dad forgets, like, when you, especially like as you get older, you kind of you know what I mean though. But what I mean is like your life becomes more 100 miles per hour. So you got all these different responsibilities, so it's easy to forget. You might have had someone, then you're like, you forget about it. Like you don't remember it anymore. So then like 4 or 5 down the line, when they're like, oh, you actually helped me, like, oh, because I remember there was like, I remember him telling me, it was only recently we went to a wedding, and then the lads that get married, they basically, my dad had this like quad bathroom project. Basically, I was too young to go, but unfortunately, but like they had this project, so he took them down, and then like a couple of the lads were messing about on the bus. And my dad goes to them, look, if you're going to carry on messing about on the bus, you're not going to get to go on the quad bikes, like in front of everyone. So so then they thought, oh, he's chatting rubbish, he's gassing this, that, whatever. So they carried on messing about, and they were like running up everywhere, like, just doing what everyone does at like 16, 17, thinking that we'll still get to go on the quad bikes. So they drove all the way there. Then they got to the quad bikes, and then my dad goes, you two can't come. You got to sit tight and watch everyone else. And so then obviously when they got sat out, obviously they were pissed off and they were swearing at the time. But then later down the line, I think they realised like that kind of like
that was critical.
That something has to change, like something has to give. And then like when I realised that's when I realised, like, coming back to your point, is like it's hard to recognise, but then like once it's done, it's like it's a great sense of accomplishment. Like you actually help someone like change their lives around.
And it's and it's not always easy, is it? I think some people need to sort of be not taught a lesson, but they need to be basically they need to be treated with some clear intention to say, actually, we don't expect that, and there are consequences of your actions.
But if anything, it's more respect. Because you're getting respect as adult now, as in like you're being treated as an adult. So then that's a bigger respect if you look at it that way. As in like he's not looking at me like a kid, he's looking at me like an adult. So I gotta live up to an adult's responsibilities.
But it's but that's not always reality, is it?
No.
Might want the best of both worlds.
But then it's like it depends on who you want to be and what kind of image you want to give to the young people. Like if you just want to be a guy that just gets them to do fun activities, but they might learn a tiny bit, but they're not learning the full picture.
No,
unless they're
not developing themselves.
Exactly.
They're not developing their sort of leadership, their understanding, their sort of qualities as a person. So I agree with that.
So then, just to round it off, let's just talk about the future of Sport Birmingham and like where do you want to take in the next couple of years, the next few years, especially the legacy of the Commonwealth Games.
I mean, there's obviously a big focus. I mean, some big sort of bits for us is we're trying to, in a real difficult circumstances, cost of living is going up, and we've heard all the latest stuff around that, but it's how do we actually sort of protect things a bit more. So we've got some investment we've got to make. So we've got some community grant schemes. So we've got something called a Together Fund, which is about how that can help clubs and organisations support some of those priority audiences across Birmingham. We've still got some small grants from the Commonwealth. So we still see that we want to be a positive organisation that's investing across that sort of community and grassroots sports area, and we want to see growth, but we want to see growth, I suppose, if it's right for those organisations. It's not just about growing activity all the time; it's actually about growing growing them as organisations,
Yeah.
so that
And
they
then
can actually be more resilient, and they
exactly.
can cope better,
Yeah.
and they can provide,
And in turn help more young people.
yeah, and they can provide, and you know, because they're so important, because they're in tune, they know what the young people want. You know, we've got the whole sort of digital transformation of how, you know, young people look at information, consume information.
I mean, that's what this
both
podcast-
positively,
Yeah.
both positively, but also negatively as well. So it's you know, so as an organisation, we want to be open to definitely supporting those grassroots communities. That's priority number one. We've got so we're doing some work around digital. So we're looking soon at launching something called Active Birmingham, which will be a digital platform that will help both young people but also professionals find activity. So based on their preferences, they can find any activity across the city much more easily. So that's quite a big bit of work for us to sort of help start that sort of digital transformation.
Build the algorithm and that coding.
Yeah. So and then
no, that'd be really good, you know, because I feel like I missed out on that. Like, in terms of like
well, if you think how easy, like we go back, how easy it's to order a pizza.
Yeah.
And then actually, if you want to go and play sports somewhere,
exactly.
there's not really like you can go on Google.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
we want to have
Yeah,
something that's, you know, a bit stronger, represents Birmingham, and put lots of preferences on there.
Like, I mean, looking for a boxing club, like for my young brothers and that, I couldn't find one, like, you know, through searching and stuff. Like you know where to look.
So that's what we're because you know, there's a big thing around actually awareness and making sure people know what's on their doorstep and then further afield. And so that's quite a big piece of work we want to do to help people find things easier, but also recognise that how people get there easier. You know, like, you know, so that we're talking like an activity finder, but they'll be built in some things around how you can get the bus, you know, which bus to get, which train to get, get the bus off.
So
there,
make it easier to
there.
navigate.
Exactly. So that's another one we want. We're going to be pushing and working with, and then. The other bits of work that we're still, like, as I say, we're still quite prioritising around young people. So we still have there's a project which is part of the legacy called Gen 22, which is about getting young people, giving them opportunities to do to volunteer but learn new skills, but also to provide some you know, to do something that they believe in. So like some social action. So they might say, actually, we want to clean up this park, or we want to go to this place, and that's a program that's supporting that sort of notion. So there's quite a bit for us. I think the other big push for us at the minute as well is to make sure make sure things are both safe. So make sure young people can go to safe spaces and safe clubs and things like that, but that also helps support the development of new coaches as well. So we're looking for, you know, whether it's young people, old people, but developing more good coaches and good people that can work. So they're sort of our priorities really at the minute. And I can send you some more sort of information on that. But the big one for me is that whole digital bit. So I think that would
and I think that's
change.
massive. Yeah, because
we've got
a small detail, but like thinking on it now, like there's not about it.
No, and it's really
especially in Birmingham as well, like for local, because I didn't even realise like the boxing club's a bit dead, but on my doorstep there was a boxing club, and that's important, because if it was any good, then like I would have actually took my young brother there and we actually done something.
Well, we want to get to a point where we know there's all the boxing clubs in the city, so we know that actually if someone's wants to go boxing, it's the easiest route for them to find that and to get involved in that.
Exactly.
And that, you know, that goes across all the different sports, all the different
from
activity.
football to squash to like
and also, you know, recognising like Birmingham, we've got loads of parks, we've got like nearly 600 parks, and actually, you know, they're your parks, you know, they're the public's parks, so it's actually knowing where you can do activity in those spaces as well. So there's some really exciting things coming forward.
And I look forward to seeing you, Tom. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. It's good to meet you. Thanks for having me.